On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we preview the Metropolitan Division. Who takes home the crown? Will it be the Rangers once again? Will it be the Islanders? Will the Washington Capitals ride the surge of Alex Ovechkin? We'll find out.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. And we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Isha Jahromi of the Sota Pod joins us once again as we dive into the Metropolitan Division. We'll see how things shake out as we project how the standings will look come the end of the season. My name is Seth Toupal, credentialed Wild media member, host of the show since 2021, and joined by a good friend of mine once again, Isha Jahromi of the Sota Pod. And Isha continuing to maneuver our way through these divisional previews. Training camp has begun, and so we're getting into hockey mode, just a couple of weeks away. And you look at this Metropolitan Division and certainly has some firepower up at the top, but there were a lot of interesting things that happened in this division in the offseason.
Yeah, much like the Pacific, like there's definitely tiers to this division, and we'll get into it. I feel like there is a 3-team tier at the top, and then like arguably 1 or 2 mid. You know what? I'd say 3-team mid, and then there's like 1 clear at the bottom. You could even say that like there's 4 teams in the mid section, but there's definitely like 3 at the top, a few in the middle, and then there's like 1 clear at the bottom. Now, some of you might be surprised, but like, no, I think there's 2 clear ones. I will contest that as we get through this this preview and projections here. And like I did last time, Seth, I went through every single team, identified their top forwards, identified good depth forwards, identified top defensemen, identified depth defensemen, and then I graded their goalie tandem, coach, obviously forwards as a whole, and defense as a whole. And my team to start, the team I think will be the best in this division, but not necessarily by too much, is going to be the Carolina Hurricanes. Again, they're 1 of 3 in the top tier. I do think they're going to be the best team in this division, and their top forwards I have identified are Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis, Nikash. Depth forwards, Martinook, Stahl, Kotkaniemi, Roslovic, Fast. Top defenseman, Slavin, Burns, Gostisbehere, despite how cheap he's coming in. Like, he's on a team that actually if he's on a team where he doesn't have to be the top guy and can play his offensive forward game, he's going to give you 30 to 50 points in the bank. Well, I'd say 40 to 50 points in the bank, so I'm going to put him in the top defenseman. Depth defenseman, Chatfield, former Vancouver Canuck, love him. I'm so glad that he's been able to play his way into a solid depth role and actually make some money at $3 million as well. And Orlov, I know coming in as a pretty cheap contract, but and a little older of a player now, but Stanley Cup champion, has seen it all on good teams with the Washington Capitals in particular. So I like their depth on D. I like their top D. I like their depth forwards. I like their top forwards. Their goalies, pretty good as well. I rate their goalies B+. Rob Brindamore, A coach. Forwards as a whole, I grade them an A, and defense, I'll say a B.
Okay. So I will, I like the Hurricanes. They're a team that, you know, it's crazy how many good players they have without having like those true, like there just aren't I don't know the right way per se to explain it, but there just aren't a ton of those guys that are like the household names. But they just have such a solid roster that they're always going to be there when it's all said and done. And so I love stacking them in that number one spot, which leads me to believe that I think I can guess who's number 2 on your list.
Yeah, well, number 2, I put the New York Rangers as number 2, but I honestly think the New Jersey Devils could be number 2 or even number 1 this season, given like how much young talent they have on the roster and how many of their young guys can pop, especially with their young guys being surrounded by a lot of really good top and depth pieces who've been in the league for a while and who've been in the league for a while, and not to mention their acquisition of Jacob Markstrom as well. But I did put the New York Rangers as number 2. They have top forwards such as Kreider, Zibanejad, Panarin, Trocheck, depth forwards such as Hedl, Lafreniere, Kakko, Carrick, Coyle, Vesey, Brodzinski. Top defensemen such as Adam Fox and Trouba, kind of. Depth defensemen as Lindgren, Miller, Schneider, and Jones. I like their goalie tandem. It's not bad. I'm going to rate their goalie tandem as a B-, coach B+, forward group B+, and defenseman B-.
So then I think, as you alluded to, I would imagine that means that you're putting New Jersey third.
Oh, yeah. Third with like the potential to rise to number 1.
Yeah.
Depending on injuries, depending on just how some of their young guys take a step forward. If obviously Luke Hughes is healthy to start the season and remains healthy, like there's some factors, but for the most part, like they actually have a pretty good team. Like top forwards, Palat, Hischier, Bratt, Meyer, obviously Jack Hughes. Depth forwards, Tatar, Holla, Nosen, Cotter. Cotter's good, by the way, too. And then top defensemen, Luke Hughes, Hamilton, Pesci. Depth defensemen, Siegenthaler, Dillon, Nemec. And I like their goalies as well. Like goalie, I rank A-, coach B+, forwards B, defense B. So I like the New Jersey Devils a lot as well.
Highest variance, I think, is the that's the appropriate term for the New Jersey Devils there at 3. Yeah, I think getting a few of their weaknesses really shored up is going to do them some good. I mean, Markstrom is going to come in and be better than what they've had over the last few years.
Oh, yeah.
So that shores up that area significantly. And Sheldon Keefe is he's no slouch as a head coach. So he's gonna be able to pull a little bit more out of some of these guys. And like you said, it's
especially
a good
some of the
young
younger guys too.
Yeah, it's a good young nucleus. They just need a little more direction to kind of push them in going the right way. So I like them as the third team in kind of that first tier of those that are probably most likely to make the postseason from the Metropolitan, because you're going to get the first 3. Beyond that, it's all about going toe-to-toe with the Atlantic, which we'll cover next week. But we've got 5 more teams, Isha, and so we'll move on to that next cropping of teams, and we'll talk about some of the iconic names that are part of the Metropolitan Division. All that is coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, listen to this. You've got college football going on right now. You've got the NFL in action. Major League Baseball is getting close to playoff time. And before you know it, the NHL will be back in action too. And so as a sports fan, there's no better time to start thinking about which games you're going to. And Game Time can help make the ticket buying experience as stress-free as possible. More time for you to tailgate before watching your college football team take on their heated rivals. More times for you to meet up with friends before going and seeing a Friday or a Saturday night game. Game Time gives you the ability to see where your seats will be, and you can even toggle the Game Time picks, which will make it easier for you to save more on sports, comedy, theater, and more. All in pricing, which is another feature you can turn on, shows you what you will pay without blindsiding you with the fees. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Reminder, the Locked On Wild sweepstakes continues. All you need to do is take a screenshot showing that you are subscribed to Locked On Wild on YouTube, add in your name and email lockedonwild@gmail.com, and then you are entered for a chance to win 2 tickets to see the Minnesota Wild play the Columbus Blue Jackets on opening night. Dino back in the building, and we will give you that opportunity. Again, all you got to do, take a screenshot and send it to lockedonwild@gmail.com with your name. You're entered in. It's that easy. Full contest description can be found in the description for today's episode.
Speaking of Dino, that week on Fellowship of the Rink, that will be the guest on that episode.
Oh, my
a little bit of a teaser there. So check out Fellowship of the Rink, one of the many shows under the Sota Pod network umbrella now.
Yeah, and Michael Russo was the guest this week.
Yeah,
from what I saw, and a good training camp primer to get us started.
I'm rolling my eyes because he was like, "Oh, watch! I'm gonna tweet out lines from training camp first day, and everyone's gonna come after me. A bunch of idiots, blah blah blah." And look at that, bunch of idiots on Twitter getting mad at him for line combinations. It's day 1 of training camp. Calm down, everybody. Jeez, there's 57 people in training camp. Calm down.
A lot of looks.
It's absolutely insane. Some of these fans, man, they're absolutely insane. Some of them, like, I'm convinced. But anyways, they're passionate, which is good.
Yeah, passion comes second to none.
Passion comes
Minnesota
with
sports
insanity.
Wow.
Anyways,
so we got our top 3: the Carolina Hurricanes, the New York Rangers, and the New Jersey Devils. So now we move on to this next tier, and these are all teams that were separated by, like, right up to the end of the season, Isha.
Yeah.
And just, they were in a dogfight for a wild card spot up until the last day of the year. And so it's likely going to be that same thing going on this season. So who do you have at 4 in the Metropolitan Division?
Yeah, so you said it there. There's like 4 teams that are pretty much going to battle it out here towards the end. Now, 1 or 2 could very well drop and just have bad seasons because they are leaning on some of their big guns, and we just don't know how good some of their depth pieces or young pieces are just yet. So at 4, I have the New York Islanders, but I truly believe that either the 3 teams under them could jump them, right? Like these next 4 are very much interchangeable, but I do have the New York Islanders. Their top forwards who I have identified are Horvat, Barzal, Lee, and Nelson. Depth forwards: Duclair, Pajot, Engvall, Palmieri, Cizikas, Holm, and Holmstrom. As far as their top defensemen, yes, I'm including him in a top defenseman because I do think he's one of their top defensemen, and I truly think he's a top defenseman. In Romanov, I absolutely love the way that guy plays. Dobson, Pelech, Pulak. Solid top D, actually. In depth, they have Riley and Mayfield. Kind of takes a step down after that. Goaltenders, pretty damn good. I give their goaltending a B+. I give their coaching a C+. I think Patrick Waugh is a joke of a coach in the National Hockey League, personally. I think he's a junior coach, and I don't think he's a good coach of the NHL at all. So I'm giving him a C+, just because, like, I can't be. He didn't have too much of a sample size on his return. Was not impressed with what I saw upon his return, and I likely won't be. But maybe that's just a personal vendetta. I don't think he's a good coach at all. Forwards C+, and defense C+ as well.
I think the thing that will define these teams that we talk about next is that their success is going to hinder, and this might sound like I'm diving into cliche, but I feel like especially with these teams, because the depth gets a little more thin, a big injury is what likely will lead to a 4th to a 7th place finish in this division. Like if anybody has anything go catastrophically wrong, these teams they just don't have as much as the top 3 in the division do to be able to overcome that. Yeah,
no, for sure. Right under them, where like I went back and forth on if I should put Philly above the New York Islanders. They're pretty much 1A, 1B sort of thing as far as this next tier. I really like the Philadelphia Flyers, a young core. I love that Michkov is joining them earlier than we all expected. And I think their coach in John Tortorella is one of the best coaches in the National Hockey League. He's one of the only old school coaches who continues to be able to get the best out of his players.
You and I will be Team Tortorella long after we leave this earth. Like he just has the perfect recipe for getting more out of players, but not only being able to like pull more out of particular players on the roster, but just being able to demand more from the whole team in general. Yeah. And knowing when to push the buttons, knowing when to kind of, step in front of the crosshairs for the team, and knowing when I need to kind of light a fire under this guy a little bit. Like he's
a player's coach, and he identifies players who want to win versus want to just be a star. And that's what I love about him. You buy into the system of winning and to like go to war with your troops, and he will respect you even if you have a bad night. It's if you play selfishly and don't care about winning and don't care about the team. Obviously, every player cares about winning and plays about the team, but puts you above the team. That's when he has an issue. And this is hockey. You can't put yourself above the team. This is a team sport to its core. And John Tortorella, the only stop in the National Hockey League that hasn't worked was 1 year in Vancouver. That was it. Other than that, everywhere he's gone, he's found success. So
proven track
Stanley
record.
Cup, Stanley Cup champion, right? Stanley Cup champion coach. Got super close with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Or actually, no, one with the Tampa Bay Lightning. What am I saying? One with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and got super close with the Rangers many times as well. So, yeah, absolutely love Torts. So, right away you can see I give the Philadelphia Flyers coaching an A, but to identify their top forwards, I did put Couturier in this. It's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, he's had a lot of injuries, but, operating under the assumption that he picks up where he left off, he's one of their top forwards for sure. Konecny, Michkov, I think is going to be a top guy 100%. Obviously, there's going to be some growing pains early, but I think he'll be able to. He's either going to be like rally right out of the gate, and then probably like mid-season have a little bit of a dip, and then if there's no injuries, then probably will end the year off strong, or it's a little bit of a slow start and just absolutely catapults after that. But yeah, I got Michkov up there. Frost, love him. Tippett, love him. Farabee, love him. And I think Bobby Brink takes another step up this year as well. Huge fan of Bobby Brink. Depth forward, you have Lawton, Paling, Cadiz, Forster, Delorier, and Johansson as far as depth forwards. And hey, I like all of them as well. Top defenseman, Sanheim, Jamie Drysdale. Again, I am going to put him in that top defense group. Obviously, we don't know too much about him just yet, but his ceiling is super high, and it's not like he's been hanging out in the basement much at all. I think his floor is pretty high as well. Ristolainen, I know, far from the player that he used to be in Buffalo and things like that, but still, I like. I'm just going to put him in that top defense category, but you could consider him in the depth category as well. Not many depth defensemen. Now, Zanula, Sealer. I should say York also in the top defenseman. He's great. So, yeah, Sanheim, York, Drysdale, Ristolainen. And if Ellis plays, Ryan Ellis as well. But again, we know his history with injuries. Zanula and Sealer as far as depth. So their defense is a little thin, but I like the top guys in their defense. So, yeah, coaching A. Their goalies, I'll give a C. Forwards, I'm actually going to give a C+. And the defense, I will give a C as well.
All right, now I am intrigued because we have two teams coming up that have iconic players on the roster, and both of these teams are kind of trying to stay as competitive as they can while those players are still on the roster, and it's the bag has been mixed. So who's next up in your rankings for the Metro?
Again, it could go either way, but I have Pittsburgh just above the Washington Capitals. And It's funny because where they're pretty much they're very similar. Now, if Nicky Backstrom didn't pretty much retire, right? Because he's I guess officially retired, right? Because of all the injuries he's facing and things like that. And if TJ Oshie is healthy this year, then those two guys, I mean, Oshie will be playing this year, but if Nicky Backstrom was there, then I'd probably rate the Capitals a little bit more, but he's pretty much done, right? So I do have the Pittsburgh Penguins above them. Top forwards, obviously newly re-signed Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin. I'm going to put Rust and Raquel also in that top forward group. Depth forwards, they actually have a decent amount of depth forwards. Bunting, Eller, Hayes, Glass, Achari, Puustinen. And I'll put McGroarty there as well. Again, I don't know. We haven't seen him at the pro level yet. So that's why I'll put him at depth. Halfway through the season, maybe he proves to be one of the top guys. But again, a lot of questions still. But he's a guy that's likely going to make the team. The reason he's not with Winnipeg is because he didn't want to play in the AHL. He wanted to play pro, so they're going to give him every opportunity to do so. Top defensemen, obviously, Carlson and Letang. Neither of them have really lost a step in what they do best. But that's pretty much it for their top D. Now, they do have some decent depth in Pettersson, Grzelcyk, Graves, and Aho, but again, not the greatest there. They're going to lean heavily on their top guys, especially since Letang can play more two-way than Carlson. Love their coach. Sullivan is obviously proven to be one of the better coaches in the National Hockey League. So I'm going to give their coaching an A, goalie C+, forwards B-, and defense a solid C+.
Okay. It feels like 4 through 7 is going to be separated by 5 points or less.
Yeah.
They're just all very similar. They maybe do things a little different way, but it feels like they all have kind of similar needs to get to that top tier. All right, so we roll through. That was number 5. So who is number 6? You already teased it, but let's
Washington Capitals.
Yeah.
And obviously top forwards: Ovechkin, Oshie, Strome, Wilson, Dubois? ? Hopefully, I mean they're hoping, right? Because he's basically Nicky Backstrom's replacement, right?
Right.
So again, if he works out, then put him above. That could be above Pittsburgh, where we just don't know yet. Depth forwards, Mangiapane, and he's solid, man. He's solid.
Mm-hmm.
You. Some people could say, well, why didn't you put him in the top 4? Sure, he could maybe be in their top forward group as well, but I got him at is their best depth forward. Nick Dowd, McMichael, Milano, Radish, Duhaime, and Lapierre had a really good year last year as well. But again, none of those guys are put up insane amount of numbers other than Mangiapane. Those guys are more two-way guys, very, very much core depth pieces, not guys who are going to help you score goals every single night, right? They're very much going to lean on Ovechkin if Oshie's there, Strome, Wilson, and Dubois for that. Top defenseman, Chychrun, that's huge. Chychrun, that's great. He's going to help in the offense. Carlson obviously is going to help in the offense. And then on the kind of the defensive side of their top forwards, they signed Roy. Roy. Whenever I see Roy, I just think Derek Roy. So
well, and I never know because there are variations playing in the NHL right now. Like the Kings have a Wah, I think, or a
well, that's
Roy.
who they signed. That's who
that's
they signed.
The one that they okay.
So it's probably Roy, but
there's one of each.
Anytime I read ROY, I just think Derek Roy.
Well, there's one of each in the NHL right now, and it throws me every time. Because I make a point to like highlight particular players on the other team, and every time I see that last name on the roster, I'm like, which one? Which one is it?
I should know because I watched the draft and the free agency, and I was just like, oh my god, they signed this guy for this much money. But anyways, as far as the depth side, they got Sandin, Furhervey, Van Riemsdyk, and Bear. Okay. I like Van Riemsdyk on the back end. I think he's a solid depth piece. When Bear is healthy, he's good as well. Sandin is fine. I mean, it's just there's not really many world beaters. Like it's solid, but it's not that great. So and coaching wise for the Washington Capitals, I'm just not super familiar. So I give kind of a cop out C+. And obviously last year was good enough to help them almost make the playoffs with the limited pieces that they have due to injury. So I'll have to see him again this year to be like, okay, this guy's actually like legit. But yeah, C+. Not bad, not great. I personally just don't know too much about him.
Yeah.
Goalie, look, I want to give the Minnesota boys some love. And he was really good last year, but that's just it. I got to see some consistency this year. So I'm actually giving their goalie tandem a C-.
Okay.
Mostly just because we don't know yet. We don't know.
Yeah.
That could catapult, and it could be way more come mid-season. It could go up to a C+ or even a B- if he continues to carry them again. But I don't know if Charlie there, if that was just a flash in the pan, or if like they're really confident that he's going to be that guy. And if I'm not there just yet. I'm hoping so because I like him. Obviously, want to root for the Minnesota boy, but just don't know yet. Forward C+, defense C+ as well.
We're gonna finish because I should clarify that was number 7 because we've got one more team who is 8. There's a little bit of a separation between them and the rest of the pack. So we'll talk about that final team. I wonder who that could be, and we'll just take a look at the division in general. Who makes the playoffs? Who's out? We'll finish up with a couple of things here on today's episode of Locked On Wild. After this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, you have heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. Folks, you have literally 2 more days to be able to take advantage of this deal. So with college football back, with Major League Baseball entering the stretch run, with the NFL back, with the NHL season a couple of weeks away, you have no shortage of ways to make that $5 bet. You don't even have to win. It doesn't have to be a winning bet. $5 is all you need to grab yourself a free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. So head to FanDuel.com right now to download America's #1 sportsbook and take advantage of this amazing deal today. One final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to check out Locked On NHL Prospects for your second listen today so that you can take a look at the organizational prospect rankings that will be going on here as we get closer to the start of the season. Taking a look at the top prospects for every team throughout the NHL. Locked On NHL Prospects, keeping you up to date on all of your favorite future players as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And also, of course, with us getting closer to the season, make sure to check out everything that the Sota Pod has to offer as well. Fellowship of the Rink, my appearance on the show with Isha, also Judd's Buds, and I will just say, just to give people a little bit of an enticement, more on the way.
More on the way, and the return of MNCAA. So
there we go.
All your college coverage in the great state of Minnesota. So a lot coming this season, as well as I've already posted 5. Basically, every single game that's not on a Saturday, I will be hosting watch-alongs on the Sota Pod YouTube channel as well. If you want some different play-by-play from LaPanta, which I know most of you do, hit us up. The Sota Pod will be live, will be interactive, and it's going to be a lot of fun. All the games all the streams are already posted. They're already ready to go. So there's no excuse not to check it out if you want something a little bit different as far as play-by-play.
That sounds like fun. I might want to join one of those sometime.
Hell yeah. Hey, we'll have a lot of we'll have time between on commercial breaks where I'll be bringing people on as guests just to talk about the periods. So yeah, always the invitation's always out there for you, my friend.
Excellent. All right, I'm not going to keep it in the dark anymore because we know who the 8th team is, and really unfortunate circumstances for Columbus tragic. Going into the season. Like I don't envy anybody on that team, anybody in that organization having had happen what just did, going now and trying to get ready for a hockey season.
Yeah.
And so
I'll say this though, like obviously from a heartbreak point of view, it's not easy for anybody, for the management, for the coaches, for Johnny Gaudreau's teammates. And then again, from a management point of view, right? They lost their best player, right? And you can't replace that in a snap of the fingers. And no disrespect, you're not going to be able to replace the person, the human, the man, and the player that is Johnny Gaudreau. But you guys know what I mean from that point of view. So that's why Seth said, it's layered in just the complications both from the heart and from a business point of view are just horrendous all around, right? I will say this, I've worked with back when I was living in Canada, I worked with a couple of junior hockey teams, and this happened a couple years before I joined the team, but there was right before, it was a junior B club in the VIJHL, shout out to the Peninsula Panthers, and they were just about to start their playoffs, and they had one of their top teammates pass away in a car accident. And they just snuck into the playoffs and had no business going up against the top seed. And they rallied together, right? It was almost like that tragedy brought them together, and they absolutely destroyed that team in the playoffs. And they didn't end up winning the championship, but there is a possibility that we see this team go on a crazy run. Now, am I saying it's going to be an 82 game season run? No, but I could see them really banding together and becoming even closer of a brotherhood, and playing even that extra step for Johnny, right?
Yeah.
So that could happen. Now, is it realistic? Just if you look at the team on paper, no. That's why I have them at the bottom here. But yeah, it's just, God, I can't imagine what these guys are going through, man. I can't imagine what these guys are going through. Top forwards, though, as we'll get through this last one, Monahan, Fantilli, Marchenko, and Chinnikov. Depth forwards, Boone Jenner, Kent Johnson, Sillinger, Curley, Voronkov, and Danforth. Now, Voronkov could actually end up being a top forward. He just, he put up good numbers last year. I just haven't seen enough from him yet for me to put him up there. And you know what? Van Riemsdyk signing a PTO. I think James Van Riemsdyk will likely make this team, given that there's spots for him. There's spots for him up and down the lineup. But I'm not saying there's a spot for him just on the top line there. Again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful here. There's just like there's not a lot of depth on this team anyways. So I do think he played well last year. So I think there's like he put up almost 40 points. Like there's definitely room for him on this team. As far as top defensemen, you got Werenski, Severson, and Provorov. Depth D, Johnson, Jack Johnson, I guess. Gudbranson, I guess. Harris, Jiricek, and Christensen. So I don't like their depth D at all. I do like their top defensemen though. So yeah, and their coach, pretty good. B- for coach. Gotta love Dino. I'm gonna give him a B-. I always liked Dino as a coach. I really did. I had no issue with him. It was just he was a little stubborn and shaking up the lines, but that's pretty much the only thing I was critical of when there wasn't really much else he could have squeezed from the lineup when he was coach of the Minnesota Wild. So I like Dino, giving him a B-. Goalies, I'll give a C+. Forward group C, defense C-.
So we know obviously that the top three will make it, which will be the Hurricanes, the Rangers, and the Devils. Is the Metropolitan Division going to get a fourth team?
God, right now, I'll say no. Right now, I think this is one of the weaker divisions in the league. I really think though the Pacific has two really bad teams, in the Sharks and then the Ducks, I'd say overall the Pacific's way better than the Metro.
Yeah, if you were giving out letter grades, it feels like you've got, whether you want to call the Hurricanes, the Rangers, and if you want to call those A tier,
well,
the Devils are
Hurricanes A, Rangers A, New Jersey A-, B+.
Yeah,
and then it's just C's.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is it feels like there's a steep drop off, and those next four are going to be fighting all season to be in wild card 2 contention. And I mean, those four in the Atlantic, not to get into it too much because that'll be what we talk about next week, but those 4 teams in the Atlantic, Florida, Boston, Toronto, and Tampa Bay,
they're running the East.
Yeah, they're essentially locks to make the postseason. So there's one wild card spot up for grabs, and Detroit has made some. Detroit is trying, Buffalo's trying, Ottawa's trying.
This could be the year Buffalo pops, and we're just like, okay, here we go, right?
Yeah,
and
we've been waiting for this for 13 years. They have.
Oh my god, dude, I feel so bad for that fan base because I Buffalo's one of those teams I always root for. And because I rooted for them in the dark days because I just wanted stuff I wanted everything to be fixed. I wanted new management. I wanted new ownership, the whole 9 yards. And they finally get all that, and they put together an amazing framework. And it's just it still hasn't popped yet, but it should. It should. There's no rhyme or reason why it shouldn't anymore.
They were literally 2 years ago. They were literally one of, if not the most fun team in the entire league. I think pretty much everybody outside of the fan base is going up against Buffalo for a playoff spot. We're rooting for them to get in.
It's if they were in the Metropolitan Division, they're up there with Jersey for me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's just they just ran into just a couple of insane seasons from Boston, and they just ended up just outside of a postseason spot by 2 points. So we'll see what happens. That is our obstacle to tackle next week, is the Atlantic Division. And then we finish, amazing how that planned out that way. We finish with the Central right as the season gets started. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Isha, thank you as always for hopping on here on a weekly basis. Always enjoy the chats, and many more of them coming up here throughout the season. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to once we finish hitting record here, hopping on to talk on the Sota Pod. So listeners of Locked On Wild, make sure to check that out as well. And make sure to hit that subscribe button before you head out if you haven't already, and the like button so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.